Hi, I'm BJ, and this is the Arcane Alienist Podcast. Hi, everybody. Today I'm going to recap my last session that I ran in my homebrew setting, the Mythic World of Urd. It was a short, kind of not a lot happened, but it was I think maybe a kind of a key transitional moment to the campaign, and then we will take some calls from Collin Green, Jason Connerly, and Karl Rodriguez. So here we go. All right, so when last we left the Mythic World of Urd, the party had just had a pretty rough encounter in the den of an owlbear. Also had encountered some gray oozes, which had destroyed two of the party members, one character and one retainer's armor. So we've got two characters sans armor emerging from the entrance, and they would have I rolled for surprise, and they weren't surprised, and I ruled that's because as they came out, their horses were all upset. But what they notice is there are some gnolls closing in on either side of the cave entrance. There are 4 gnolls, to the left, and 4 gnolls to the right, and they notice them kind of encroaching. One group, the group to their left, is going to have to either attack their horses or pick their way through their horses to get to them. But the other ones the other group of gnolls to the right have a straight up just shot at coming at them. So half the party kind of formed up lines on the right, took some shots with firearms and slings and bows, and they hit a couple of gnolls, but they didn't really kill any of them. So the gnolls advance, the fighters advance on the gnolls, and begin melee, while the rest of the party, they take a couple of shots at these gnolls that are approaching their horses, and the gnolls just fall on the horses. I managed to kill one horse before the other horses kind of bolted and got away. A couple of the characters managed to grab horses and mount up before all the horses fled. Jessup, the thief of the party, just chose to, he rode off and rounded up the horses, the 2 horses that bolted and fled and had gotten far away. Harold, the fighter, who's got this giant lizard that he's captured and has trained as a mount, jumps on his lizard and charges into the gnolls. And we had a pretty cool, he's got a blunderbuss, so he's able to kind of hit them in a spread, shoot at 3 of them at a time. But didn't roll all that well. He softened them up a little bit, but eventually he starts to go down, and they swarm on him. At one point, one of the clerics, Hedimir Kane, had managed to get on his horse, and he's like, "Is there any way I can just ride through him and kind of get him to back up?" So I kind of ruled that, yeah, you go ahead and ride, and I'll have each of them make a saving throw, and if it fails its saving throw, it's going to take some trampling damage, get in the way. And if it misses its saving throw, it's going to take just a 5-foot step back. So he's able to ride through and sort of clear a path to give Harold a breather, but then the gnolls just closed in on him again. So it kind of goes back and forth on 2 fronts. They lost a horse, and another they hadn't had really much chance to heal up from the last one, so they're all kind of leery of being in a protracted fight. But Harold, who was still pretty healthy, but he got knocked down to negative hit points. This was our first session of at the player's request, playing with a negative hit point rule officially. But he didn't die. He came close, but they managed to save him and get him back on his feet at the end of the fight. But it was a cool sight of him charging these gnolls on the top of his giant lizard and blasting him with a blunderbuss. I thought that was a pretty neat image. And then the creativity of the guy who plays Hedimir to kind of charge through them and kind of break up the mob for a minute just to give everybody a breather. That was really well done. This is the one where we officially switched to an individual initiative, so probably more didn't happen because we were kind of slow getting our pace. So it seemed like a really long, almost the entire session was this battle, even though it was not a large battle, but in the end, the speed really started to pick up. So this particular group, I think, does better with it. They just grok the individual initiative better than they do the group initiative. We're still using the OSE or the BX rules about spell. You can't move and cast. You can't. If you retreat, that's all you can do. There's no attacks. All I'm doing is having them basically declare their actions. The one deviation is I'm having everybody declare actions, not just people who are going to cast spells or do a retreat move. And it kind of worked neat on the virtual tabletop and Fantasy Grounds because I have it set up where you show where you're going to move, but your token doesn't move. It just shows the path. So I say, everybody who's going to move, go ahead and plot out your moves. So you're declaring your moves, and then when their turn comes up, I can click on their token and it moves. And so that kind of helped with a little bit of the visual thing. Although what we did find out is that I as the DM am the only one who can see the arrows where everybody's plotted their move. They can't see each other's. So it's still possible for them to get in each other's way depending on how initiative goes round and round. And that did happen nearly once where Hedemar on his horse had busted up that mob of orcs and was going to try to kind of come around behind and attack. And, I was like, well, you're going to move into the line of fire of two people who've declared they're going to make ranged attacks at that same Knoll. And did I just call the Gnolls orcs a minute ago? Well, we're talking about Gnolls. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I'm not going to rewind and find out. Anyway, but he's like, well, my character wouldn't know that they were about to do that. And I'm like, well, hey, that perfectly simulates some of the chaos of battle when you're not prepared and don't have like a marching play, a set of strategies lined out, or you're not kind of in formation like a military group. It's just all kind of a den of chaos. So it worked out pretty well. Everybody thought at the end, I think the feedback I got was that it worked better and they felt like we were doing it. So, and again, we're not really, the only thing different from the rules is written as far as how you would do individual initiative with OSEs, I can tell, is having everybody declare actions. But that also, I think, helps make things, I may continue to do that even if we were to go back to the group initiative. I think that's a nice way of doing things. And I don't think it significantly alters the way a game of BX, D&D, or Old School Essentials would play. Anyway, so they managed to survive that, but as they're sort of regrouping, they've got all their mounts back. A couple of them are going to have to double up because one horse was killed. I guess I should also mention that the fight ended with the magic user Celestina putting the last two Gnolls to sleep, everybody, the party just kind of coup de grace and then took care of Harold. Anyway, they got regrouped, they got mounted back up, and they can realize from the sounds in the distance there are more Gnolls coming. And the more they hear, the more they realize kind of the only safe direction it appears to be is towards to the east and to the sulfur mine, which is occupied by they sort of cleared out, so the dwarves could go back and resume their operations of their mine. But they get there and there's all these kobolds camped out in front of the entrance. And they're like, what are all these kobolds doing here? Well, recall in the previous session they had gone to the cave where they had fought goblins and cleared out the goblins, and then the kobolds had relocated there so that the dwarves could have their mine back. But now the kobolds are back, but they're not in the mine. They're just hanging out on the outside, and the kobolds tell them, well, the bugbears came back and ran us out of the cave where we had set up. But the dwarves are kind of letting us camp here, but they're not really letting us come inside. Well, the party's like, look, from what we can tell, there's like a whole horde of gnolls sweeping through the forest. Everybody's got to get in here for safety. So they kind of argue with the dwarves guarding the front door. The dwarves let the kobolds come into kind of the first chamber and then call for their leader. And the leader, recognizing, that these are friends, the party has helped them and their allies, concedes to let the kobolds in. So they barricade the door in time to keep the Gnolls from sweeping over everybody, and then they sit down and they have a discussion with the leader of the kobolds and the leader of the dwarves. They're able to resupply their ammunition. The two who lost their armor are able to get armor replaced, and they're going to hunker down here for a little bit to see what happens. The reason this is going to be a turning point in the campaign is now they're also able to tell from the spy holes and stuff that they can see from within the dwarves' kind of mind, which is also kind of a stronghold. It seems like this just tremendous number of gnolls just kind of swept through the forest and then turned south towards the keep. So they suspect the gnolls are going towards the keep. I think this will be a point where they've got some decisions to make about what they're going to do next. Do they go back where they were in the previous fight and look at the other two caves, still looking for the bugbears and trying to locate all this missing gunpowder that they know the bugbears had carted off somewhere? Or do they try to make it to the keep and see what's going on there, if they can is the keep under siege or is it safe? What's going on? So that's kind of where they're left with right now, and it'll kind of be up to them to decide where they go. I'm ready to continue in either direction that they choose, and we'll see what happens here in about a week. So that is a summary from the Mythic World of Urd. I think again I want to mention just some of the lore. Once again, that in the setting I've created here, the Gnolls are not quite the typical D&D Gnoll. What they are is they are animals who have been possessed by demons, which causes them to kind of mutate into humanoid. But they're still, just bent on destruction and mayhem and chaos and things like that. So they're not just an evil humanoid species. They're actually demon possessed animals, and that have been mutated and turned into kind of these kind of like beastmen. I think you might compare to Warhammer. I didn't set out to just have them be beastmen, but it kind of evolved in that direction. And at one point I was like, oh, I guess they are kind of like, I guess that's kind of what they're like. They're infused with chaos and black magic and things like that. So we'll see if the party wants to continue to deal with gnolls or try to sneak back while the coast is clear and pick up where they left off in the caves. All right, well, that's it for the Mythic World of Urd for this time around. So now we're going to turn to some calls. Yep, one thing before we go to calls, I forgot. In the discussion with the kobolds, they were also kind of looking for the entrance to the underworld where the kobolds had come from when this chaos cult had pressed them into service, with the aid of the bugbears and goblins and hobgoblins. And Hagel, who's one of their retainers, who's a kobold, couldn't find it, and he was just beside himself that he couldn't find it because that was his job, and he was getting really down on himself. But the other kobolds say, hey, when this is all settled down, some more of us will go out and we we'll be able to find the way. So that is a possibility of something they could pursue next time. But the kobolds did mention in passing that the place they lived in, the underground, was a ruined structure, underworld structure. They didn't build it themselves; they just kind of took it over because it was abandoned. And they mentioned that they think it might have been at one point dedicated to a god. They talk a lot about a single eye motif around in some of the ruins or the things that were left behind. And so the clerics are able to suss out that they may be talking about a mythic figure, a god called the Great Cyclops, who is dwells in the underworld. So I think I'll have a lore episode coming up next when I get a little bit extra time to kind of we'll get another dive into the lore of the myths in the Mythic World of Urd, dealing with the Great Cyclops and his domain in the underworld. All right, just wanted to throw that in there. So now we will actually turn to the calls. Okay, let's listen to some messages that I've gotten. This first one is from Collin Green of the Spike Pit podcast, also occasional YouTube channel. So let's hear what Collin has to say about making things your own, and about who might have been involved in the development of the Old School Essentials Advanced Rule Set. Here we go.
BJ, I totally have to make an adventure my own, especially them big old Watsy ones for 5e. I can't run them for love nor money. I get muddled up with the NPCs, I get muddled up with the plot lines, and I'm not always a massive fan of the suggestions. So when it all comes tumbling down around my ears, I'm not always that sad about it. Plus it gives me a chance to throw in any other good little nuggets that I like to. I more or less treat Tomb of Annihilation as a campaign setting. I would, however, be most interested to hear how you get on running 5th edition along with OSE Advanced Fantasy Genre rules, doing the Temple of Elemental Evil. That'd be real interesting. And if you have a peek inside that advanced fantasy, I think part of the reason why you might like that book so much is to do with the proofreaders and the team of playtesters. It's a who's who of gaming. Take care, mate, and I'll catch you later.
Thanks, Collin. Yeah, who's who of playtesters? I do see your name in there, which I think you're alluding to, but I also see Che Webster, who is the host of Roleplay Rescue, also here on Anchor. So be sure and check out Collin and Che, Collin at Spike Pit and Che at Roleplay Rescue. A couple of great podcasts that are available that talk about gaming, both old school gaming and modern gaming and ideas behind gaming, and couple of good quality podcasts from across the pond over in the UK. We'll stay tuned, Collin. I think we've got definitely got both. I've got definitely both a 5e and an OSE version of Temple of Elemental Evil coming up in the near future. So we'll see how they compare and contrast once we get into it. Thanks again for the call. Take care. And now we got a call from Jason Connerly of the Nerds RPG Variety Cast. So let's hear what Jason has to say.
Hey, BJ, Jason here. Just want to mention, you mentioned about like OSE, Advanced OSE. Labyrinth Lord does have Advanced Labyrinth Lord, which is kind of similar. Labyrinth Lord, you kind of asked, it's not a direct clone of BX, or it's not a copy of BX like OSE is. Labyrinth Lord being one of the older retro clones, they still were feeling their way out with the SRD and all that, and they weren't really sure what they could do with the OGL, and so Labyrinth Lord does change some things, little things, but it does have some changes, minor mechanical changes, like experience point requirements, things like that, because they weren't sure how much they could directly copy and not get, slapped by Wizards of the Coast. So there is that. OSE has definitely benefited from a greater understanding of the legalities of the OGL.
Hey, Jason, thanks for pointing out the Labyrinth Lord, which is kind of the original BX retro clone. Again, not an identical copy, but one of the early ones. And I haven't ever looked at the Advanced. I'll have to check that out when I get a chance. I have the original Labyrinth Lord, but I'll have to go. I'll have to track that down when I have a little bit more time and some extra cash to spend. My role-playing game collection has grown quite a bit over the last couple of years as I've continued to participate in both modern gaming, but also gotten into the OSR stuff. So I'm having to pace myself so that they aren't just sitting around gathering dust. But always appreciate your calls, Jason. So take care, and I'll talk to you later. Now we're going to switch over to the rest of the calls will be from Karl Rodriguez of the Geomologist Presents on a number of topics, and we're going to start off talking a little bit about AD&D versus old school advanced, and then what you might how you might run different adventure modules from classic adventure modules and things like that. So take it away, Karl.
Hey BJ, I guess OSE Advanced is like to you like Hyperborea is to me. I think Hyperborea does a lot of really cool things and does them well. So when you were saying oh, Advanced OSE does this. I'm like, oh, well, but Hyperborea does. But I think what you've shown me is that it's worth looking into. And I know I've supported the OSE and the Advanced OSE Kickstarters, and I have all that stuff. So it's worth looking into and doing a dive into it, because I know I've been playing around in my head I really want to do the, Slavers series, and maybe Advanced OSE is a way to go to it, to give that feel, that old school feel that it had back then, but without the complications of AD&D 1E and its convolutedness that is, I don't remember, but possibly there. Speaking of reliance on the VTT, it was very interesting that the last encounter in our Abomination Vault, there was no battle map or VTT provided. It was supposed to be Theater of the Mind, and I guess live you could just draw it out, no big deal. But with the Fantasy Ground, there was no map provided. We just had to wing it. Well, Theater of the Mind it, I guess, with the order of operations. And I tried to describe. Actually, I thought it was more interesting, truth be told, because I could describe or communicate to you what that library was like, and you could take advantage of that description or not in doing cool things. And it gave some neat visuals, like when Arlen's character kicked the axe to Goblin and it stuck in the shelf, right? It's kind of neat without a VTT.
I would agree that I think OSC Advanced might hit what people enjoy about AD&D without some of the fiddly bits, particularly that fall to the Dungeon Master on managing combat encounters and adjudicating experience points and things like that. So I think in the upcoming Temple of Elemental Evil that we're going to do, I think the big thing people are going to have to keep in mind is that we're not playing Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. Even though it's Temple of Elemental Evil, I'm going to convert it to OSC Advanced, and to be mindful that even though we're playing the advanced options where you get the character classes from AD&D, they still run like BX character classes, and so there's going to be no negative hit points, and some other things that make them particularly squishy at first level, because we're going to try to play it rules as written for that outing. But we'll see how it goes when we get it to the table here in the near future. And I say table, I mean the virtual tabletop. And yeah, you're right, that was kind of odd that one encounter had no map. I wonder if that's because it lacks a map in the published version, because I think they can only create maps and images that appear in the print version or the PDF version you would get direct from Paizo. So I've ran into that a couple of times before, where some minor encounters in D&D stuff for 5th edition didn't have a map in the package that you get for Fantasy Grounds. So, but we made it work with Theater of the Mind. It was pretty cool. It all worked out in the end. So, all right, now Carl's got a little bit to say about comic books.
Right, it's Marvel. Sorry about that. It's a Marvel 1602 by Neil Gaiman, which is pretty cool. I feel like I got to reread these things because my memory isn't what it used to be. And I did find out I still have the first, well, it's not Excalibur #1. I guess I must have gotten rid of those, but I kept the original special edition graphic novel that they put out. I still have that, and a lot of Lone Wolf and Cub, but probably I have to look at the order of which ones I have. There's the English, version of the Lone Wolf and Cub they put out. I think Dark Horse did that, but I'm not sure. So yeah, 1602 would be kind of neat. I need to reread it and figure that out. It's interesting. It does tie into like Roanoke and Virginia Dare, things like that, as well as Queen Elizabeth and the plot to kill her, of which there were many, I believe.
Hey, Carl. Yeah, I have those same Dark Horse edition of Lone Wolf and Cub from the when did they start putting those out? In the early aughts. They come in a little what are they, like 4 by 4 inches, comic books, and I think the only thing they did, because I know Frank Miller was instrumental in getting that done, was they reversed the pages so you could read them from left to right. So interestingly enough, all the characters are left-handed. And then they just translated as best they could and as accurate as they could all the dialogue and language into English. So yeah, I have that whole set. That was one of my just an amazing, and of course influential. It is influenced, not only that they adapted it to film and movies, but it's influenced The Mandalorian and so many other Western comic books in the way, particularly with Frank Miller, the way he's done Daredevil and Batman and Wolverine and kind of the grim, unstoppable hero diving headlong into a crowd of enemies. That comes from Lone Wolf and Cub, I think. So, but yeah, that is Marvel. As I mentioned, Marvel 1402. I think that's I would love to do a superhero campaign set in that time period, the Elizabethan era. That'd be a lot of fun. So thanks for that call. And now I think we've got some more about some old war stories from Forgotten Realms. A little more from Karl. Here we go.
Yeah, I guess things are morally gray, right? Talking about Star Wars and the Clone Wars and what people will do for their cause. So I guess so way back, I guess must have been 90s, maybe late 90s, early aughts, where we ran, like, I called it the Heroes of the Wilhelm Reach, and I used TSR didn't really update a lot of the Forgotten Realms that they had done in the second edition, and I always liked the Wilhelm Reach. It's very interesting, cool cities. It wasn't your standard Waterdeep campaign, and I put it, there adjacent to the Sea of Fallen Stars, and it was really cool. I was able to adapt a lot of modules to that, including the infamous Forge of Fury, where a paladin tried to climb down a rope in full armor, and, well, it didn't really work. But that's another story for another time, right? And that brings me to another point, which I think is interesting in my Forgotten Realms campaign. I think, like in my 3.5 campaign, I don't know if the characters had ever when they visited Waterdeep in the north, there are remnants of what the heroes in my campaign, when I ran it first/second edition, there are remnants of that there. And definitely, if I were to run another Forgotten Realms campaign, there would be remnants of the 3.5 campaign there. There would be the church or cult of Saint Benito, who is this character became a chosen of Ilmater, since every other freaking deity had a chosen. Why not? He was 20th level, so hey, pretty cool. But anyway, we did try to do like a Pathfinder of the children of the heroes of the Wilhelm Reach, and it ended very badly. So they all they got TPK'd in the second part of the Shackled City, and despite that TPK, although I guess technically one of the players was captured, it was a mage. So the enemy was named Tongue Eater. It's this like were-baboon, and he captured this one individual, cut off her tongue, and then just kind of kept her as a prisoner. But even when I had the avatar of Saint Benito come and try and ask the players if they wanted to be raised and given a second chance, they said no. I guess I was overly harsh for me to do that, but it was just right. It's one of those situations where unfortunately the players pulled the whole dungeon. In this case, it was like an inn where the bandits were hiding out, and they bit off more than they could chew, and eventually they gave up, surrendered, or died fighting. But Shackled City's got a bad reviews, but it's actually pretty interesting. So I don't know.
Karl, you always have the best war stories from the games you've run and things that have happened. So yeah, they didn't. I think that transition from second to third edition is kind of unique in the history of Forgotten Realms, and that's the only one where they just kind of did it. They kind of, they addressed some changes in some of the novels, but I think, and maybe some of the source books, but there wasn't this big fanfare like there was from first edition to second edition, they did the Avatar Crisis and the Time of Troubles. And then from third edition to fourth edition, they did the Spell Plague. And then from fourth edition to fifth edition, they did the Time of the Sundering. This is big, world-shattering events that change the nature of everything moving forward. That second to third edition, I think they tried to kind of pin that to the return of the Netherese, but it wasn't this big event that was you saw everywhere you turned. I think between second and third edition, or maybe I missed out on it because that was a point where I wasn't really actively involved in gaming. I'd taken a break for a few years between the twilight of second edition and the beginning of third. So maybe there was more fanfare and I just didn't see it. That's interesting to have the legacy of previous characters show up in later campaigns to kind of emphasize a sense of continuity. All right, well, thanks again, Karl, for all the calls. That'll do it for our calls, and that'll do it for the show. I hope everybody out there is doing okay. Thanks for listening. Thank you again to Jason and Collin and Karl for their calls. And I'll be back some other time. And that's it for this episode of The Arcane Alienist. I want to thank Dave Bone for the cover art that I use for the episodes. Check out ironseer.com. And the music is Come and Get It by Scott Holmes Music. Thank you for listening. Give me a call sometime through the Anchor app or at the Anchor website. And I'll be back in the future with another episode.